Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second day of the conference on the freedom of the press. This year, titled "The Press Freedom in the Digital Era." My name is Uri Dromi. I'm the director of the government, not the government anymore. Jerusalem, that's right. Jerusalem Press Club. No, I was impressed with the last night's speech of Nitzan Chen, so it reminded me of my days in the government press office, different times. Welcome all our viewers on the application, the people who registered to be connected to the conference digitally, and I encourage you also to use our app and be engaged with the conference, with the speakers, with the sessions. Don't forget to go to the Showbox station. Some of you have already, right? Noam, you did. Record yourself and create within minutes a video clip for yourself. I mean, very simple, very friendly, and you're gonna like it. Today is May 9th, which is the anniversary of the victory over Nazism, and today in Jerusalem, some veterans of the Red Army. There's a 8th. It was the real date, but until the Russians heard about it, it was the 9th. So they celebrate every May 9th. And today you'll see a parade in Jerusalem with the veterans of the Red Army with all the medals. And personally, I have the highest respect for these people. And I think it's a good date to talk about fighters of the freedom of the press, because maybe Nazism is gone, but there are other threats to freedom, including freedom of the press. So we're very happy to have with us this morning Jaroslav Wlodarczyk, who's the CEO of Press Club Polska in Warsaw, a good friend of the Jerusalem Press Club. And thanks again for all your support and collaboration with us. And we have Alexandra Gobskaya. I hope I pronounce it right, from Press Club Belarus. Just joined, I think, last year or this year, joined the International Association of Press Clubs, and welcome. And we know we'll hear from you what you have to go through in order to promote and sustain press freedom in Belarus. So, Jaroslav, please come to the podium. You can...
Thank you.
We don't want to be uncivilized here, you know.
Shalom. Good morning to everybody. I was asked to speak a few words about the IAPC and Freedom of Speech Award, while I'm Secretary General of the association since few years. And but we changed a little bit plans, and I will, in the first part, just make a few words about this, and then I will talk about situation in Poland, when some asked to be better informed what's going on. So, just to give you a brief information about IAPC, we are in the chain of independent press clubs from all over the world. Now it's almost 40 countries. And the newcomers are Belarusians, which we are very happy, and also now we go in October to Rwanda, and probably about 30 to 40 press clubs from sub-Saharan Africa will join the association. So we'll swallow the whole continent this year. And IAPC Also, some people ask me what is the difference between journalist unions and press clubs. The difference is that unions are representing journalists and press clubs are representing values of journalism. So that's the quickest definition. Also, press clubs are not closed only to journalists, are open to other memberships and members, except politicians, of course, and which are special category people, with all the respect. And also, press clubs are enabling the platform for discussion and exchange of ideas, and we are not doing what unions, journalist unions are doing. For instance, I don't know, negotiating the rules of hiring journalists, or it's typical for unions. And since 4 years, we are presenting the Freedom of Speech Award. Here on the images, you can see on the top left, that was the first award presented to Reporters Without Borders, not to individual but to organization. I think you're familiar with them, so I don't have to explain. Just the nice thing, it was in the award is given in Warsaw, so by the International Association.
On the right,
Top left.
top right, on the right, and I have to wear a necktie because of him.
I didn't come to the second picture. I'm still on the first one. Okay. So you see the one of the famous Poles, Lech Wałęsa, presenting the award to President of Reporters Without Borders and to the Secretary General. On the second picture, where Uri is in a black tie, the award is presented to Alexei Simonov. It's a Russian dissident, the guy who is fighting with. He was actually 2 years ago on the conference here, but that's very important thing what he's doing. He's fighting with the system in Russia, but on the local and regional press, not on the national level, where there is a bigger control of international organizations and monitoring, but on the local level, where nobody knows that the mayor sued someone or pushed some, made a pressure on local or regional journalists. So this is what Alexei Simonov from Russia is doing. Yeah, the point is, he was formally, when was beginning of Putin, not regime yet, he was democratically elected. He was even in the board of, kind of the media board next to the president of Russia, working with. But after time, they roads split it very much. But he's working and is very successful, and there are no physical or attacks, any attacks on him personally, but on the organization, like on other NGOs in Russia, of course, yes. Yeah, so 2 years ago when Alexei came to Jerusalem, I remember he started to sing, if I'm wrong, no, correct me if I'm wrong, he started to sing this or say this poem, and Uri started to cry, if I remember correctly. Or that was opposite. You were singing or he was crying. Doesn't matter. After that, they both have vodka and everybody was happy. The last award, the last two pictures in the bottom, is Peter Greste or Griest, depends on the pronunciation, Australian or European, but the journalist who was imprisoned in Egypt with two other colleagues, and these are really freedom fighters. I mean, after the revolution, Arab Spring in Egypt, They were three guys present, and two others. When we were presenting our, two others were still in jail, so we couldn't invite them to the ceremony. And it's very interesting if you go to the International Association of Press Clubs website. You can or YouTube channel. You can see the Peter Grist address from that celebration, and it's very interesting piece of today's journalism presented by journalists who appreciate profession, values, and freedom probably more than anyone from us. So I really recommend you to see it. So that's the first part I wanted to say. Now I will say a few words about Poland and situation in Poland, because we've got Liberation Day today and we are in Jerusalem. So first I will show you how freedom of speech, how Jewish community made a freedom of speech in Poland. In 16th century, when Poland was probably the only tolerant, the only country who tolerated Jews inside, Polish aristocracy, king, church decided to sign on 1573. Actually, the original document is still in Warsaw in the archives, the Wersal Confederation Act, and this is the oldest printed written document in the new era, which is the guarantee of the freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of expression. And the particular reason were Jews, because there was the aristocracy wanted to have the written document signed by everybody, even a church. And the Bishop of Warsaw was at that time the chairman of the Confederation, so he had to put a stamp. These are stamps in the bottom. So he had to put a stamp, and from that day, there was a freedom of religion, of expression, and freedom of speech. So that's how Jews helped Poles to start a freedom of expression in Europe in 16th century. And that's the first document, much earlier than British documents, or English rather than British, English documents about the freedom of speech. But today, situation a little bit changed, because not only because of technologies, but also because of politics. And I want to give you a few examples, because there is a huge rumor that in Poland freedom of speech is in danger. It's not so bad, but the atmosphere is not very good. But actually nothing happened yet which would be surprising to us or will make a big change. But some symptoms are very suspicious and dangerous. Last year in autumn, Speaker of Parliament got a brilliant idea that he will close the Parliament buildings for journalists and will build a lovely media center outside of the building of the Parliament, and journalists will work there. So there will be no access to politicians until politicians will not come to the media center. So we as a press club wrote a letter, and this is the letter on the left, and about 25 or 28 editor-in-chiefs of newspapers, television, and radio stations signed it. There was no result of it. So we made December 16th the day without politicians in media. So you see, they were blurred or scratched. On the top left, you see the frame, which was almost in every media. 40 largest media outlets joined it from the early morning, and politicians were really surprised, both governing and opposition, because for the first time, all media outlets united. From doesn't matter political views, people united. And I remember I went to one of the television stations to give the interview about the Day Without Politicians, and suddenly we are sitting in the room, and there was a parliament session that day, and opposition went to the place where you make speeches, and they started to occupy parliament with the inscriptions "Free Media." Which we are not very happy, because when politicians are supporting journalists, it's also dangerous. But I mean, we couldn't do anything with that. So the result of that protest was that Parliament was not working for over 6 weeks, was occupied by opposition. And after December 16th, few days later, the next day, I remember that correctly because that was my birthday, the Speaker of Senate called me in the middle of the night, can we meet? So I went there, and there was only the Facebook transmission, and I just announced him I will not talk with him personally. We have to meet the whole group of journalists, editor-in-chiefs, not me, as dealing with one person. And 2 days later, and on the right, here are these pictures. This is the Speaker of Senate. We came a group of over 40 media outlets which protested under umbrella of Press Club. And of course they wanted to start negotiations, blah, blah, blah. And we said, no, there is no acceptance for the limiting citizens' access to the information. Because this is not our business, this is business of citizens. Okay, so they said they will give us a new proposition in January this year, and in January they announced no changes. So they stopped, they made a step back. That was first time with this government. They made a step back, totally through to the garbage their proposition. So still journalists are in the parliament without problem. Of course, they try now limit to the photo reporters, photojournalists, to cameras, but they know we monitor it, so they are afraid of the repetition. So it's very, we are very happy that these negotiations succeeded. And honestly, the Speaker of Senate, the whole concept was idea of the Speaker of the lower house, but the Speaker of Senate made these negotiations quite well, and I'm very happy that they decided to make a step back. And also, today's government made a change, overtook the public media, radio, television, and press agency. And politician became a chairman of public television. It's the top picture. It shows how Poland, which will be next slide, is divided. I will return to one of the pictures. Do you see the guy, the second from the right? Is the editor-in-chief. This is the new Adam Michnik, the editor-in-chief of Gazeta Wyborcza, because Adam Michnik is almost retired. And this is Jarosław Kurski. So rather, let us say, left liberal part. And this is his brother, Jacek Kurski, not twin brother, but brother, who is the politician of Law and Justice Party and became a president of, chairman of the public television. So that makes, it shows like in one family, they are totally split. But it looks very dangerous when we say politician became the chairman of the public television. It is dangerous, and it's not in any standard, and we, of course, announced that it's a bad way, but we have to remember that it's normal in Poland after communist times. And on the bottom, you've got 4 of 8 former chairmen, 8 or 9 chairmen of the public television, all politicians who were with different political parties nominated to be chairman of the public television. So the first one is from ex-communist, the second is Solidarity Movement, the third is the Christian Peasants Party, and this one is from the Civic Platform, which was the last 8 years when Donald Tusk was Prime Minister of Poland. So I would say it's not good standard, but it is a standard in Poland. So nothing changed too much. Some journalists were fired, some journalists were hired. Actually, the biggest exodus of journalists where they're fired was 3 years ago when this gentleman was a chairman and Donald Tusk was a prime minister, and that was with the political acceptance. They fired 400 journalists from public media. And we protested, some organizations protested, but they made optimization of the costs. But this polarization of Polish media is coming to the crazy. It's maybe 10% of media, but they are becoming really crazy. I'm showing you an example. On the left top, you've got a Polish edition of Newsweek, which is the most left liberal magazine in Poland. It has nothing with American Newsweek. This is very politically engaged on one side of the conflict, political conflict in Poland weekly. And you see the leader of the leading party and the Minister of Defense as a Talib, and Warsaw Uprising, about the historical, so using the symbols. So on the other side, there are right-wing magazines and media. So what they made, the guy almost like Goebbels, in the Nazi uniform, is the editor-in-chief of Newsweek. Okay? This is the portrait. In the other newspaper, the editor-in-chief of Newsweek, as a revenge for that covers. And this is one of the last weeks of Europe of 2 speeds. And this is Donald Tusk. That's before the re-election to the chief of the European Council. It's Donald Tusk in the Nazi uniform with Angela Merkel behind. So, as I said, it's going to polarization which should not happen in media, and there are discussions, is it possible to stop it somehow, but still we don't see the solution, especially when all over the world such a polarization is developing, and more emotional journalism than stick to fact journalism. So that will be, that's all what I wanted to say. And just to make final remarks, I would like to say that I deeply believe that what we were talking yesterday on the other side about the fake news, the real journalism, real news deserve real journalism. And the problem is, and we are not talking about the threats of, we say about fake news, but we do not talk about, for instance, social media, not in the aspect of spreading the news or fake news, but closing the information bubble and actually eliminating you from the news, but also taking all the money from the media. So it seems that social media quite soon will bankrupt all traditional media, because they don't pay for the content. And I do not agree with someone yesterday said that, Carl Bernstein said, that people want news. No, people just want headlines. And when they read headline, they think they are well informed. So the question is, who is going to pay for the real news, the deep stories? But so I would say the only one who should pay for it is Facebook. I wrote the other day essay about that Facebook should pay, like, I don't know, 50% of their incomes to the journalist fund to develop important stories. It sounds like a crazy idea, but a few weeks later, Guardian wrote about a story about it, that it looks possible that Facebook or Google, because not Twitter necessarily, because they are news creator, not just aggregator, would pay for their content, because they make money on journalists and they do not share this money with media outlets. So I think there are a lot of discussions and topics to talk, but I have to give the stage to Alexandra, who is from the country where freedom fighters are fighting every day on the streets the last days.
Yeah, I start with a blacklist. Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank you once again for having me here, and I have two short questions to you. Please raise your hands, those who know where Belarus is geographically situated. Okay, so those who don't know, please Google it. There is a Wi-Fi connection here. And another question, raise your hands, those who have enough information about current political and social situation in Belarus. Okay, thank you, Wersal. So actually this is good because I'd like to give you a brief description of the political background, and I would start with this image. For the past 3 years, I read only few articles from foreign media where the line Belarus, nicknamed the last dictatorship in Europe, didn't appear. So it's the most popular brand of our country nowadays. But actually it's not so easy as it seems. It's much more complicated because it's a very modern authoritarian regime. It's not a. It is for some researchers and for some politicians a dictatorship. I don't really share this idea, but why? Why is it modern? This is an image from the military parade. It doesn't take place on May 9th, so not today. Today it will be only peaceful manifestations and festivities, concerts in Minsk, and in all other cities around the country. But this is on July 3rd, the holiday of the independence of the Republic. To my opinion, a perfect main picture for all those articles, which starts with the line, the last dictatorship in Europe. What do we see? We see the President Lukashenko, who arrived to power in 1994, and his youngest son. He's now at the age of 13 or something. So sometimes he's described as the future president, but hopefully we won't get a monarchy in Belarus. However, beyond this, are many lawyers which could describe better what the country is. First of all, our military parades are actually modern sales pitch, because Belarus sells a lot of arms, and even Russia managed to sell arms through Belarus, especially after the conflict in Ukraine started. Secondly, there was an ice hockey championship. The president's favorite sport is ice hockey, and we held an ice hockey championship in 2014. Thirdly, Belarus is ranked the first country on the European continent regarding the amount of Schengen visas given to every single citizen of the country. That means that Belarusians travel a lot. And the last thing I wanted to underline is the IT industry. The export of all software products and engineering products from Belarus amounted almost $1 billion US last year. So it's sometimes called the new Silicon Valley in Eastern Europe. And if you know the Viber, for example, messaging application, it comes from Belarus, or Masquerade, face swapping application for Facebook, or the game as World of Tanks, very popular right now. So again, beyond this layer of a dictatorship, there are many very modern constructions that works really well. And yeah, the last thing, since the gambling was banned in Russia in 2009, the casinos are flourishing in Belarus. So it's like once you go there, an idea for you what to do. Yeah, okay. So briefly, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Belarus got independence in 1991, and there was a brief period of democratization of the country till 1994, when Lukashenko arrived to power. But in the second round of the presidential elections, there were only two candidates. So Mr. Alexander Lukashenko and Kebic, who was from the communists actually. And independent media at that time. Independent media started to appear in Perestroika, during Perestroika times, so from 89 to 91. All independent media outlets started to support Lukashenko as the least of two evils, right? And this made actually his victory possible. But the first thing he did after he arrived to power in 1994, he started to repress all those independent medias, because he understood that next time they won't support him, right? So there was a referendum in 1995, and then in 2005. In 2005, Mr. Lukashenko got the right to be re-elected with an unlimited number of times, right? And starting from late 90s till 2006, the government used all the variety of repressive methods regarding the independent media. The network and monopoly actually for the distribution of the newspapers was formed, and independent newspapers were dropped out of this distribution network in 2005-2006. Sorry. Apart from that, there were economical repressions. That means that investors were not allowed to invest on this or that media outlet, or, for example, advertisement. Those companies who wanted to make advertisements in independent newspapers, or I don't know, web media outlets, when formerly were allowed to, but then the administration courts, the courts started to press them, right? And all other, really the whole variety of methods. For example, my newspaper, which was initially published in late 90s, were closed in 2006 because, like, the KGB arrived and said that the team was using toxic colors to print the newspaper, and they took all. This is how the history stopped, let's say, for a shorter while for our media outlet. Yeah, and then we had the first massive manifestation in 2006, the so-called Ploshcha. After 2006, tens of hundreds of journalists and civic activists were forced to leave the country, and Poland, actually Polish government at the time, made a huge step towards our civil society, because Polish government gave a lot of fellowship scholarships for civil activists, and till nowadays a lot of Belarusians work in Polish media outlets. In 2010, the history repeated, the story repeated. There were 50,000 people manifesting on the main square of Minsk, but that all ended up with massive, with violation of human rights and with very violent repression of all those who were able to go to the streets, right, who wanted to contribute to the freedom. And then the summer 2011, the so-called silent protests, people started to group via social media, right? Distribute information that every Wednesday evening there will be silent protests on the central parts of the cities. So people were going out and just standing and clapping because everything was forbidden. So the so-called clapping protests were taking place every Wednesday for about 4 weeks. After that, the police in civil form started to grab people, hundreds of them, and again close them in jails for from 5 to 15 days normally. And in 2012, there was a very good, very interesting action. This was a teddy bear airdrop. A small airplane flying from Sweden crossed the border and dropped the teddy bears with those placards that you see. We support the Belarusian struggle for free speech and free media, and they dropped those teddy bears. What was important, near the private residence of the president. Of course, those journalists and those photographers who arrived first at place and took the pictures and shared that on the social media, they were arrested first and they were closed in jails for several months. But this was another important point in our struggle, let's say. And one, what about current times? So from 2012 till 2017, there were basically there were no manifestations. There were no active activities, right, around the freedom of speech. There were no manifestations. People were so threatened. They had such a fear that they didn't manifest. They didn't go out after the falsification of the presidential elections in 2015, and Lukashenko won with a rate of 83.5%. But the civil society kept silence. What was the mistake of the government? At the end of 2015, Lukashenko signed a decree, the so-called decree number 3 against the parasite, for the parasite tax. That means that all people unemployed since 2016 have to pay a tax, which is of about $240 per year. And you should remember that the average salary right now is $350, and even less in the province cities. Sorry?
The average salary per year?
No, per month. However, to pay, once such an amount, it's kind of quite a lot. I'm sorry. And that gave a push to the new wave of protests, because this February 2017, was a deadline to pay this first tax for the 2016. Sorry, for even 2015. So to the previous year. And about 450,000 people in Belarus got this letter, notification from tax services that they have to pay. And suddenly, in February this year, people came to the streets. That was a huge discovery, let's say, a real surprise. as well for the government, as well as for the opposition. About 3,000 people took part in the manifestation in Minsk. And actually, this was a first step of the wave, because the protests repeated in even very small province cities. So hundreds of people, those who probably never took part in any manifestations and never protested, they went out to the streets for very clear reason, for this economical reason. If in 2012, 2011, we protested against the violence of the freedom of speech, or the freedom, yeah, very briefly. This year it was very, very different. And what happened, this is an image from this year, from the March. On March 25th was the highest point. Till now, more than 120 journalists and bloggers were arrested and got fines from the government as they covered the topic of the protests, right? A lot of them passed about 2 weeks, from 5 days to 15 days again in the jails. First, all of them are liberated, but even in May, they got the notifications from the courts that they have to pay the fine, whether to attend to the court for some reason, and so on and so on. Of course, those who are freelancers, or those who cooperate with international media, are targeted first. And this is a big issue. What we do in Press Club, we made an exhibition as a point of reflection, on May 3rd, the International Day of Press Freedom. This was our way to say thank you and to show our man of solidarity with all those who are brave enough to cover the topic. So basically the Belarusian Press Club, our work is like running a marathon, because we clearly understand that the changes will not come in the nearest future. So our goal is to make a place, work for the circumstances so that the dialogue with officials and with the government will be possible in future. But it's not the case this year. So the last point about the social media, they actually played a very good role for the civil society, as Belarusians are capable enough to work together, to cooperate, and this public by help was organized to support those journalists who had to pay the fines and who passed the days in the jails, in prisons. Through this public, Belarusians from Belarus and outside Belarus, from all over the world, donated $52,000, which is a big sum. And I just encourage you to learn more about this issue. And of course, you can go online and Google the mass protest in March 2017, and you will have a lot of information. So, yeah, thank you. Sorry to be so long.
Thank you, Alexandra.